3 practices to begin to change your culture. Might not be the best title in the world. I like 3 because that's how we learn. And I'm passionate that we really can change culture intentionally. And just as important, I believe that leaders at all levels can do that. So coaches, absolutely. I mean, I think that's often part of our mission, whether we say it out loud or not, is to influence and begin to move the culture of our companies or our clients. And Scrum Masters can also begin to move the culture of an organization with the work they do with their team. So I really am thinking at all levels. Just a couple slides, background on me. I'm a co-founder and principal at Elevate 2. Elevate 2 is a purpose-driven company. This is the current iteration of the words we use to describe our purpose. Culture change, I don't think the word culture is not in there, but culture change is definitely a part of what we do. This is how we think about what we do. This stuff's not that important, but I will make the PDF available if Lori wants to share it later. And if anyone knows Eric Willicke and Christine Hudson, those are my amazing co-founders. And what I want to do is introduce myself, of course, not just as a board member, but kind of how I come to this work. I know tribe might not be the best word these days, but it's a word I've been using since tribe.net was a thing. If anyone remembers that, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's one of my superpowers. And it's a lot of what Lori was just talking about. Like, I feel like I understand the dynamics of how a deeply connected community gets built. And I consciously helped do that. And I did it for the world-class Agile coaching team we had at Rally Software. I try to help do it the Agile Denver community. And I've also done it at the kind of Burning Man Ranger community, which is what that picture on the bottom is. Burning Man is for anyone who doesn't know, is a kind of a cultural arts and music festival, but really it's a culture hacking experiment that they're trying to spread through the world. And the Rangers are a group of volunteers who focus on mediation. They're a lot like coaches. And it's very much volunteer, and yet the sense of community within community among the Rangers is part of what attracts these amazing people to spend half their vacation, which is this festival, basically working to help make people safe and happy. So I think a lot about how to build those communities, and a lot of my work lately is to coach and mentor the people who are trying to build a tribe and a community and a new culture in their companies. And a lot of my stories are going to come from that work. So imagine, if you will, a culture that provides a sense of connectedness, in which you feel seen and appreciated for your strengths and talents, and in which it is safe to learn and grow. This picture is a bunch of Rally Software alums who are genuinely thrilled to see each other. And my Rally experience isn't the only reason I know how to create a culture like that, but it's probably my model for just how far you can take it. How open, how safe, how encouraging, how strong a sense of belonging. There was a time when most ralliers probably thought we had simply caught magic dust out of the air, you know, and that kind of once in a lifetime, I don't know how that happens, and you can't recreate it ever again. But the reality is that there were very specific practices and behaviors that created that culture. And you can never create the exact same culture again. But those things that I just mentioned were created quite intentionally by the senior leaders through the guidance of Gene Tabeka, eventually through the guidance of all kinds of leaders at all levels, continuing to make it happen even when we were growing, you know, by double every year, right? So leaders at all levels, but I will admit, the higher up the people who are kind of making, like living those values and modeling those behaviors, the bigger the impact. And so yes, you can have an influence from anywhere. And if I can get the CEO acting and talking differently, that's a big deal. But there's no reason to wait for others. You can help create that in your organization, with your own team, with the people that you kind of have influence over. So that's what I want to talk about in kind of very practical sort of tips, right? Here's what I've been thinking a lot about. What I mean, like, what do I think an amazing culture is? And for a while, I was just kind of using a lot of Agile words, like, oh yeah, we want Agile collaborative, and enabled. People feel enabled. People feel empowered, and this idea of like iterative, incremental. But I challenged myself recently to really describe it with no jargon and sort of separate, and what's the essence. And I've been reading a lot of Brene Brown lately, which will creep up in what my conversation here. But these are sort of the three dimensions that I've come up, that I've started to really think about, right? So this idea that you are seen and appreciated for your talents and strengths, right? And so how does that get? I mean, to be seen, like really seen, is so core. Brene Brown talks about it a lot. It counteracts all of our internal sort of fears, right? So how do you do that? Well, you facilitate discussions, often in meetings, so that every voice is heard. A lot of coaches do this a lot. I think facilitation is often, usually for an Agile coach, one of our superpowers. But I want everyone in the company eventually to be able to do this. And that was one of the things that was amazing at Rally, I have to say. Even the front desk clerk knew more about how to facilitate a great meeting in which all voices were heard, more than most people I know. This idea that it's safe to learn and grow. So, I mean, obviously the whole premise behind iterative and incremental, right? We value learning over planning, and we want to have a plan to learn. But how do you really make that safe? And make it safe even on an individual level, as well as sort of as teams and whatnot. And then this idea of belonging and connection. This was where I was particularly inspired by two things, actually: Brene Brown, and I've been reading Dare to Lead, and also this book Sapiens. I don't know how many people have read that book Sapiens. I forget the subtitle, but it's all about the fact that our only real superpower as animals is the fact that we're social, and our ability to collaborate and work cooperatively, and that every sort of big leap in humankind came because we got even better at getting even larger groups of people to work together, and that happened always by creating some sense of belonging, and connection. And I'm gonna the really practical tip on that one is about expressing appreciations, which a lot of coaches know this concept, and it's another one that Gene Baker really instantiated at Rally. We'll talk about it, but a lot of people's appreciations are about gratitude, but they're actually about way more than gratitude, and they are about the storytelling that basically reinforces the culture you're trying to create. So you get people to tell stories about people already living the culture we're looking for. So we're going to talk more about that. Sorry. Okay. All right. So let me take. I'm going to take each one. So make space for every voice. I mean, this is, to me, the core of facilitation. There's a guy who he was a CTO at a Rally customer years ago, and then now he again became a Rally customer, and at another company that he's leading engineering. And one of the things this friend did was, I was kind of amazed, is very early in their transformation, they brought us in to teach what was originally Gene's facilitation class. And they bought a bunch of them, like a whole bunch of these classes, at 25 people a piece. And I'd always struggled to sell this thing. So I kind of, as a product manager in services, I kind of went up to Troy and I'm like, hey man, you get it. How would you describe why you've done this? Why have you brought in this facilitation class, and why is this your, and maybe starting point is not quite the right word, because I think they'd already done safe training, but what he said to me was, I'm running all the frontline managers through this course because this is how we begin to change the culture of the organization. When we teach frontline managers to consistently facilitate open and honest discussions in which every voice is heard, and we take advantage, we basically take advantage is probably the wrong word, but we leverage the talent that we have. So I love that, and if they can do that, then they can hear their people and begin to trust them better and begin to decentralize decision making, which is one of the keys to going faster, of course, and making better decisions. So lots of things are required to make that level happen, the decentralizing of decision making. But I want to start with this, kind of making space for every voice, which you can help do in any meeting or discussion you're a part of, regardless of whether it's your meeting that you're running. So have you ever been in a meeting like this? What does this feel like? The guy says, someone says, any questions? Okay, great, let's move on. Right? Was that person really wanting to hear questions? Mm-mm. And most people, I think, do it out of, they're not being malicious. They don't have the skill, right? Or my other favorite, whoops, my next favorite, this is a safe space. Who wants to share? It's like, you don't make a space safe by declaring it to be so, right? It's not enough just to say it. And then, let's brainstorm the problem. Who has an idea? Just shout it out. No bad ideas, right? Again, not creating a condition for everyone to actually participate, right? So I'm going to kind of break this up into sort of what I think of as little practices and big practices, right? So little things anyone can do. Well, it helps if you're the facilitator, actually, with a lot of these, but right. So the whole, the simple, and again, because you guys are coaches, I'll even say it a little differently, right? Is can you teach more people these tricks so that they aren't, because it's usually inadvertent how we subvert the culture we're trying to create by doing these things. So teaching people that when they ask any questions, that they count to 10 to themselves, right? Or 5 or whatever the right number is, but count to yourself. I had to actually count to myself for a very long time before I learned to be comfortable with silence, right? Having working agreements that are actually agreed to. So I don't know a coach in the world who doesn't, create working agreements for the meeting, but I've seen plenty of folks sort of shortcut it a little too much. And if you're trying to change the culture, you have to kind of, so first you already introduced working agreements, great. Now we're going to go back and actually make them a little bit more effective by making sure that people actually agree, right? The consensus vote. Well, first of all, that if you bring in a set to start with, that you ask, does anyone have any adjustments or additions? And then again, count, right? That you help, as people make suggestions for agreements, help them make agreements for behavior and not feelings, right? So don't get mad. There's no agreement that no one's going to get mad, but you can definitely have an agreement that no one will yell. I've never actually had to have that agreement, but I did once have to have an agreement that we don't throw pens. It was a very heated time for that company, for that product. Do the consensus vote. Make sure everyone really is ready to let these be our working agreements for the next however long, right? And then help people understand how to use them, right? So, if we have a working agreement, one conversation at a time, people are talking over each other. It's not, hey guys, quit it, right? It's hey, we have a working agreement that we want to have one conversation at a time. Is that agreement still serving us? Is the way I learned to say it. So it's not about me. I'm not complaining and I'm not yelling and I'm not, we agreed together. do we still all agree? And if that's true, now what, kind of thing. And that can take, and it can take courage to call out those violations. The other mistake, and I'm totally guilty of it, if I'm stressed, or maybe it's a really intense meeting and I'm having trouble focusing, or maybe I'm losing control of the group, right? There's a lot of energy and emotion, and I'm not handling it very well, and I'm flustered. And then you let the violations continue. And it's a very, at the end of the day, they'll tell you it was fine, right? But it's a subtle message that working agreements don't mean anything, right? And it matters because it's the things like people talking over each other, or getting loud, or having back conversations that makes it for the people. It's sort of like the least powerful people will have an even harder time contributing. Is what goes on there. So the parking lot, right? So having a parking lot and honoring it. So making that commitment from the beginning that the parking lot will be honored. When something is going to go on the parking lot, get the person who's suggested it to write it, or if you're writing it, you're verifying the language. So you're making sure they're owning these items, right? They're not my items, they're our items. And this is the hard part, and then having the discipline to stop the meeting early enough, even before it's over, if you're running late, if that's what it takes, to make sure you address that parking lot, that every single item on there gets talked about. We agree we don't need to talk about it, or we turn it into an action item for follow-up. And action items have owners and deadlines, right? I know you guys probably know this. Again, they matter so much. They matter so much to whether people are ready to lean in and contribute, or recognize that this is kind of business as usual, right? So kind of remembering, and every one of these, is probably on the list because I've failed at it at one point or another, right? I can't tell you how many times I haven't had the strength to stop a meeting to leave time to do that, And then the last one is, the leader speaks last, but does speak. And I think that's important. I've been in meetings where the leader is so busy trying to empower everybody else that they're not leading. So they're serving by making space, but they're not leading by providing opinions or thoughts or whatever. And depending on the context, I think it sometimes sends a subtle message that I'm not fully participating if the leader doesn't speak, right? Now, that's not 100% true. I mean, I can think of exceptions, and a leader that's leaned in and taking notes, is obviously engaged. But that becomes very important. My exception to that, which I probably should put in the bullet, is if the leader not speaking, if the leader going last creates a lack of safety, then maybe the leader does go first to model what's allowed. Right? The example, the context I think out, like you want to say, hey, there are no bad ideas. I'm going to model it by throwing out something that looks is ridiculous, is utterly impossible, just to show that I meant it, right? Or I'm going to suggest, I'm going to throw out changing a sacred cow. Be like, yep, let's kill that legacy product. That's an idea on the board. And so the leader might go first in order to create safety. Thoughts
Ronica,
about any of those things? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so on that last topic there about the leader speaking first, where I have used that is when the leader needs to model vulnerability.
Oh, yes. That's another good example. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah. Lenny, you hit on something that I was kind of noting down throughout Ronica's conversation here about talents and strengths. I think there's also a component of that also talks to weaknesses and vulnerabilities. I think that unless we expose some of our failures, we're not really being truthful and honest. And as far as storytelling goes, if I don't hear about somebody, like that I can relate to, about Like, I think it's great when their kid goes to Harvard and, everything is great and they've, maintained the success and all the wonderful things they've done with their business. But, whenever I don't hear about somebody and, they're just having a flipping hard time getting up in the morning sometimes,
Yeah,
like, I can't relate. And that to me does not build the trust. Like, then I feel like I'm having to live up to certain standards. So I like
totally.
hearing about that too. And especially with leadership, I like them to
Yeah.
be able to say, like, okay, I have to step down here, you know, and I probably heard the same training or the same presentation 1,000 times, but unless I'm fully engaged
Hmm.
and they're off their computer and they're not taking calls and they're not stepping out of the rooms, um, and I had
Yeah.
that happen, and I was told, yeah, don't mess with that person. They own everyone in this room.
Ha! Nice.
I had to walk out for a minute.
Hmm.
I literally had to walk out of the room, and I went back and I said, I don't think they've owned anybody since about 1855, so let's start over.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we'll uh, we'll address that. And I just went to him and said, hey, I think everybody here would really, really like your input and could, you know, benefit from what you have to contribute to this. I get that you've been through it a few times, but what are your
Yeah.
learnings from it? And when you kind of like put it in their court and turn it back on them and give them the benefit of saying, like, we need you.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a good. I like that. There's an element of just the showing up that's really important, right? And again, leaders at all levels, right? It speaks volumes. It's funny you mentioned the personal, strengths and weaknesses. I did a podcast today with Adam Weisbart to promote my talk for the summit, and he asked me a bonus question after the pod, and the bonus question was, "What's your, what's a favorite way to create connection? Especially in this crazy time." And my answer was the practice, which is very much a rally practice, and now we do it at Elevate as well, is the practice of the personal check-in. So almost, every staff meeting for sure, most meetings that we conduct, I mean, unless they're really targeted to accomplish something, but, especially standing meetings, always start with personal check-ins. And part of that is making them real. And when it's me and Eric and Christine, that's easy. When we have kind of our extended elevator family, we tend to make sure one of us, well, now we don't have to because it's known, but in the beginning, we made sure one of us went first so that we modeled, real personal check-ins, right, that have the positive and the negative. And that was even before COVID. So cool. I like that. All right, I'm going to keep going.
Can I
go
add
ahead.
something? Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Okay. What Laurie said resonates in me because I can imagine that situation, somebody thinking he's owning the room, and this is kind of gorilla or hippo behavior. And a good antidote to that is, from my perspective, using liberating structures to involve everybody in the room and then shrink them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I love that. Cool. That's funny though. It's funny though. It's funny what you guys are saying though, because when I wrote it, leader speaks last. I was thinking of it as everyone in my audience is a leader, not the people above you, but you yourself and how you show up as a leader. I like the two perspectives. So some of the bigger practices, if you will, I think a lot of these things, other things you can do almost as guerrilla facilitator, but in terms of meeting design, right? So, how will I give quiet people thinking time? How will I give out loud thinking time? And I always think my friend Eric and co-founder Eric Willicke, he taught me, I'm going to shut up because we're both out loud thinkers, but we were with a group of quiet thinkers, and he was like, I'm going to shut up now so you can think. Let me know when I can think again. and which I love the reminder. And of course, now it's instinct, but I love remembering that some people would rather gather their thoughts quietly, maybe make notes, really craft how they're going to present their idea. And I literally can't think my way out of a paper bag if I can't talk. Like I have to talk to, so I'm not just loud because I'm loud or exuberant, or I don't think well in quiet. It's a slight exaggeration, but I like to think of the extremes. And another element of that is, as you're designing some and again, you coaches, you guys have done this a lot, right? You design some exercise where you give a prompt question and then you give 2 minutes of quiet or whatever it is, and then whatever the readout is, right? Really giving an instruction that helps people understand like what will be expected of them when they're done thinking, and what will that readout be. And one of the I watched a colleague give an instruction recently, and of course I'm not going to remember the detail, but the readout was going to be that you read what's on your sticky. So the sub instruction was, so keep it short, but also make it readable and sensible, right? And I talked to some people afterwards about, it was a great relief because they don't really, it was a big enough group that they weren't real comfortable with speaking out loud. And so this idea of kind of, I know that I'm going to read my sticky was very comforting. I love that. And I think about, how do I give space for participation to the most reluctant? So, if I know that those are some of the personalities in the room, readouts are in order, or, there's a pass the pen exercises, like all the things that we do to not just, it's more than enable, it's more than make space for, it's like truly enable and draw out and create safety. One of the ways we create safety is to make the conversation about ideas and not people. And I was doing some one-on-one coaching for a couple months with kind of an enterprise architect at a company, and he asked for mentoring, and his boss bought him mentoring, partly because he had a habit of being very combative. Like many architects, he was very opinionated and really smart, and he had lots of great ideas, and he had a habit of everything was a fight, and he was trying to be right, he was trying to win, and his boss really wanted to help him actually improve his influence by not being so combative. And so a couple of the things we worked on was in any meeting that he was in, didn't have to be he was running it, but if there was some argument about an idea, I'm like, this is what you're going to do, Brian. You're going to write the idea, you're going to write it on a sticky or on a whiteboard, a couple of words that it's all you have to do, and you're going to place it somewhere like central in the room, on the table or on that whiteboard. And then when you talk about the idea, you're going to you're going to point at it. So it's not Ryan trying to win, it's the idea being debated and neutralized. And then when people bring up other points, and I was like, the whiteboard's even better, but you don't always have one. And I was like, you're going to hand people the pen. You're going to be like, can you write that up a little bit more? So that was one of the things that we worked on a lot with him, was that idea of the making ways to make the conversation about ideas, and creating that shared knowledge space, right? So we're all working from the same information. Again, room of coaches, I have to ask, what are a couple others of your favorite ways to draw people in? All right, I'll keep going. Another part of this thing about helping people feel sort of seen and able to bring their best stuff is, so every team, every meeting, they always want a working agreement that goes something like treat each other with respect, or trust one another. How the heck do you do that? And I thought about this a lot, because respect isn't a feeling or even a belief, it's conveyed through behavior. So one of the ways that I help people treat each other with respect into something we can actually do and call each other out on, or hold each other accountable to, is I'll say, either the positive or negative. Think of a time when you felt disrespected. What was someone doing? Make agreements not to do that. Or when is a time that you have felt very respected in a meeting? What did people do to create that? And let's try to make an agreement around that. And the thing about trust for me is people have very different attitudes about trust. Some people believe trust is given automatically until it's unearned and taken away. Some people believe trust must be earned over time. And so you can't even make an agreement to trust, right? But here's the reality, and I learned this from Christopher Avery. Trust is earned through the making and meeting of ever greater commitments. So if we never make commitments to each other, there is no trust, gained or lost. You're just a person, and I may treat you with respect because I like people, but that doesn't mean I don't know whether to trust you. If someone said, hey, should I trust this person with my finances? I don't know. We're trying to hire an admin. I'm like, I don't know. Let's have that person making me some commitments, or find out how they, about other commitments they've made. So for a team to build trust with each other, they must make small commitments to one another, which is, of course, what's brilliant about Scrum, because then, we make commitments every 2 weeks and deliver on them, and boom, trust gets built. So I think that's another important element. And then my last kind of thing on the facilitation piece, right? So fearlessly provide space for all. And I think of one of the things I think about is, Riley used to do quarterly steering of, the business with the top 20% of the company, hierarchically, top 20% of the company at every size that we were. With originally designed by Gene Tabeka, there was space for every person to speak, and anyone could sort of call foul. Anyone could be like, we're making a ridiculous commitment, we're taking on too much, we're being unrealistic, or no one's talking about the elephant in the room. I can't tell you how many times and even though it was the sort of top 20%, there'd often be lower level, more on the ground, frontline people in that meeting because they got brought in because they have a specialty or context or part of their growth plan, for whatever reason. And those people could speak, and those people could say, hey, I don't understand why we're doing this. No one's really explained it. We made that real space. I think of the opposite of that, of a CEO that I was familiar with, who let the transformation consultants plan that kind of quarterly business steering meeting in the very collaborative fashion, rally fashion. And he trusted, and he let them do it. And at the end, he was like, I've never ever run a meeting in which I didn't know the outcome already. He hadn't already engineered the outcome. That was powerful. Just to maybe that's a little empathy for executives. For them there could be a lot of fear of the unknown, of outcomes I haven't engineered. So unfortunately, he later said he hated the experience and didn't want to do it again. So we can't win them all. The fearless part is providing space for all. Is you might get something you don't expect, and then that's where the real skill building, I think, is in. We don't get rid of fear. We just have the courage to plunge forward anyway, and then we build our skills around, what happens when the room gets too intense, gets kind of and it's the call a break, get curious, figure out how to get curious, facilitate a conversation that brings in more voices. Remember your goal and get the group to help you get back towards that goal, all that kind of stuff. So that's a can of worms of what could come next, and I'll be offering a facilitation class soon to help people get better and better at that. All right, safe to learn and grow. And I feel like that's both personally, can individuals grow and learn and become better and become different people, and can we make products that we're willing to learn as we build those products? My vulnerability, I guess, in this story is So both personal and professional. So I recently I had a different experience in a relationship, and I was trying to figure out what made it so much better than the previous couple of relationships. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, I'm not afraid to learn and grow in front of you. And the real revelation was, oh my God, I was afraid to learn and grow in front of these other people, right? I didn't, and then, and then therapy helped me realize there were reasons that I didn't feel safe in those relationships, and not unsafe but just not safe to learn and grow, not safe to not be awesome all the time. And I had to just always, I could have emotions and stuff, but I couldn't show certain, and you have to show weakness in order to grow, right? I have to not be good at something in order to then get better. The more professional version of that is, I remember I needed, at one point in my career, I really needed to work on my defensiveness. I kept, and one sales leader in particular triggered me a lot. And so in meetings with him, he would say things, I would get super defensive, and I started to realize like I'd lost my ability to influence, or really he and I were just talking past each other all the time, and I was like, I've got to work on that. And what I value is that I feel like people gave me the space to improve, and part of how that happens is people they allow you to have they don't run the same tape about you, right? Which was amazing. And partly I think they could do that because I talked about it. I would say, hey, this was hard. Like, this takes a lot of courage. But I was like, wow, I have realized I'm being a jerk and it's not helping. And so I'm working on that. And I'm just kind of letting you know. And and by talking about it, I gave people the space to give me space to learn and grow. That's a lot of vulnerability, but I feel like from a cultural perspective, we can even start with something much simpler and much more kind of natural as we're moving towards Agile, right? Is helping people frame plans as experiments, right? And my story there is I've been coaching a leader of I guess I would call it's kind of like the Agile PMO or an Agile LACE kind of deal. If you know safe language, what does that stand for? Lean Agile Center of Excellence. And she came to me and she was like, everybody's all stressed out because this group wants to propose a change in process and structure, and it's like way close to PI planning, and all the RTs are upset, and they're like, we don't even think this new idea is Agile. We think it might be unagile, and they don't want to allow it to happen. And she's like, what do I do? And what I've been trying to help her get better at is, your job is to model the kinds of thinking and the kind of culture we want to move towards. So how can you help the group that's changing, that wants to propose a change, turn it into an experiment, which will, by the way, then be less stressful to the RTEs, right? Because we have this rigor. So things become ideas about how we could get better instead of solutions, right? So, help them articulate a hypothesis, explain why they're doing it, how will they know if it's working, how will they know if it's causing unexpected harm, all those fears the RTs have, what are you afraid is going to happen, how will we know, what we'll measure, what countermeasures are there, and when are we gonna retrospect, right? When are we gonna look at it? How long are we gonna run this experiment? So anyway, I don't actually know the result of that yet, in the sense that I don't know the results of the actual experiment, but apparently it helped. Everyone got through PI planning. More communication happened. They really did kind of design an experiment and sort of change from we're doing this thing and no one can stop us to, okay, let's learn and grow together about how to get better.
Sorry to interrupt.
Please.
The last slide you showed us resonates in me in that sense that sometimes I feel people don't want to risk anything and experiment because of guilt if it is not right in the first try. just risking something, and yeah, it might be a failure, but we have to find out. We have to experiment. And if somebody is starting this blame game afterwards, yeah, I should have known before, and all that is going on, then it leads to nothing but yeah, unconstructive discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm gonna come back to that kind of blame and failure thing. But so I like a good. Oh, you got. It's not an Agile talk if there's no canvas in it, right? So whatever your favorite experiment canvas is, right? But getting people to do the rigor of actually writing down. And my favorite part of that is safety and recovery, right? If everything's blowing up, like what are we going to do, right? What are the countermeasures? And I think that because you can't just ask people like, okay, experiment, stop being afraid. It's like, well, okay, let's create the conditions where none of us have to be afraid, right? Let's like create safety nets and realize we have the power to do that. And of course, make sure people retrospect. But one of the things that I think makes an even bigger difference, if you want to make it safe for people to learn and grow, and for teams and products to learn, it's discouraging perfection. And so many companies have a perfection culture. I've been working a lot with business teams, so maybe temporary, teams where like a critical initiative is owned by a VP or something, and or standing leadership teams. They're not even doing software, but they're trying to work in a more agile way. And one of the most transformative things, yes, it's great that they plan together and make work visible and transparency and all that's great, but the demos rock their world and begin to change the culture. And it's really slow going at first, especially with business teams, because they're not clear on what to demo. And helping them figure that out is hard. But the hardest thing is, if I've got a group saying, well, we don't have anything to demo, I'm like, that's impossible. If you didn't, you got to have something. And the key, though, is being willing to show something that's messy, right? Like not a perfect PowerPoint, and we tell that to software teams all the time. And I mean, it's still an effort to teach that, I suppose, but that doesn't feel as hard as like now I'm trying to teach a VP or worse, a director who reports to a VP that you shouldn't spend hours and hours on the PowerPoint for the demo, right? Like, and one of my favorite, and I can't take credit for this, I was coaching this person, but it was not my idea, it was totally his idea, but he had a huge perfection problem in his team. And this guy was the president of a business unit at a Fortune 100 company. And he's trying to break this culture of perfection. And so he had his directs used to do this report, like they'd report on the state of their business every month or something. And I think they took turns. So like each staff meeting would be one person's turn to do their sort of state of their business. And for one round, he made it so you had to present someone else's business. So he was also trying to fix a silo problem. So first of all, people had to present someone else's thing, and so they had to get to know it a little bit. But he did it in such a way that they didn't have notice about which one they'd be presenting, so they couldn't make it perfect. And then people would present, and then they'd have questions, and you couldn't be expected to have all the answers because it wasn't your business. And it was all to give them this feeling of like, just relax and stop thinking you have to know everything and do like, he's like, this isn't helping us. You're wasting time. I thought it was amazing. He told me about it later. I was just like, oh, it's my favorite thing ever. Oh yeah. So the other thing this president of the business unit, one of the things he kind of brought me in to do was that he had me attend a meeting once where one of our transformation consultants was also in the meeting, and everyone was like, oh, well, Ronica's here. Clearly she's here to facilitate. And my executive was like, Ronica is not here to facilitate. She's not here to help this meeting. She's only here to listen to me and give me coaching. And he was really worried about how his words would inadvertently affect the culture. And so this is just one set that has come up lately of kind of words I'd rather, I don't have but if you really want to shift to a language that emphasizes learning, walking around and asking that question, what have you learned lately? Right? Or that seems really strange that this project is perfectly on track. Have you not learned anything? That seems odd, right? Like that, if you really want to get away from the culture of planning and delivery and instead get into learning, then leaders have to walk around asking these questions. All right, I just realized it's almost 7, so I'm gonna go faster. So this thing about fostering belonging and connection, I mentioned Brene Brown, and I mentioned the book *Sapiens*. So I've been really inspired by these things. And then I probably should have pointed this out, but in that picture of me from Burning Man, the Rangers have a color and a logo, and you get to wear the hat, you get to wear the special thing, and you're part of the tribe. And Lord knows I have a stack of red rally T-shirts, right? My proud Aetna volunteering T-shirt. And so I find myself being like, well, is it all just like logos and T-shirts? Is it all like kumbaya and going on ski trips together? And it turns out those things only matter. I only want red rally T-shirts if the really deep, amazing culture of belonging and connection exists, right? So how do we do that? And I think a lot of it is about, we do it through purpose and values, right? Turns out most people prefer to work for purpose-driven companies. And yet, have you ever worked for a company that seemed purpose-driven on the surface, but once you got inside, it didn't really seem that way? Because, like they paid lip service to serving customers, but all the measurements were about revenue, right? Or you could just tell what they really cared about. And don't answer this, but have you ever seen a set of values on the wall and thought, whatever, that's so BS. It's not how we work around here, right? But if you want to have a company, if you want to bridge the gap between sort of the aspirational values and the real ones, this is where this magic around appreciations, and this is kind of the last thing I want to highlight and share. So many people have learned this practice, and from Gene and other ralliers, this idea of appreciations, where at the end of a meeting or a training class or an event, we invite the gratitude of appreciating colleagues for touching us or supporting us. But here's how it really worked. At Rally, every month we had an all-hands meeting from the very beginning of the company, and at the very first all-hands meeting, Gene introduced this idea of appreciations. And this isn't the exact picture, but we always showed a slide of a Navajo storytelling doll, which is what this is. And the way appreciations worked is ideally you appreciate a specific individual, not a group or a team, and it's for a specific thing. And sometimes you wanted to appreciate a whole team, and you weren't really supposed to do it that way. But what you told, and I forget the exact wording of but it was like, appreciate someone for demonstrating, living our values, or for putting the customer first, or for helping helping a colleague. Like those were the categories of stories that appreciations were for. And you couldn't just say, hey, I appreciate you, Lori, for always being there. Like, nope, that's not it. It's for something specific that the person did, right? And I remember I'd been to Australia, and like every single person had made that trip amazing. And I got up in the company meeting, and I'm like, here's how so-and-so helped us make and meet commitments. Here's how so-and-so helped live Agile. Here's how so-and-so really took care of me and our customers. Like really telling a story. And it doesn't seem like that much one at a time, but month after month, you start hearing a pretty rich picture of what values in action might look like. All right, here's how my boss helped me create my own reality. Here's how we pivoted and therefore lived Agile. Here's how we spent time on the customer site with users and put the customer first, right? And you're reinforcing over and over and over again what we mean and what we value through these stories. It was amazing, and the key was, I wrote, the only person can only respond by saying thank you, and I didn't realize for a long time why that was an important part of the practice. And you don't want someone saying, "Oh, it was nothing," and discounting that whole story. You really want people telling the story and then letting that story stand. And by being, and most people hate having to say thank you. They're like, really? Like, that sounds stupid. But it's, you know, I'm going to be seen for having done something awesome, and I get to let that stand. I mean, it's incredibly powerful, right? So
can I add
yeah,
something real quick there?
yeah,
With the thank you, like how I see it is more of, if you don't say thank you, you're not accepting the appreciation which was just given to you. Like, you threw it on the floor and you're just counting it. And it's like, receive the appreciation you're getting, instead of, and being respectful, right? Respecting that you're receiving it versus just throwing it on the floor, kind of thing. And yes, it's hard for people to receive appreciation in our culture. So
absolutely.
I get that. To me, that's another reason why you want to say thank you. So anyway, it's one of my peeves.
Absolutely. So I think the appreciation practice done with storytelling, done with that kind of deeper why, is really a strong culture builder. So this is one where I'm just kind of like, just start, like, add it to the end of your staff meeting or retrospective or whatever. And if you're going to do that, make sure you create real space, explain it, how it works, wait, count to 5 in your head. If no one jumps in, you can go first, and you should be ready, right? And you should have one ready, or two, so that you can model it, and then ask again, and wait and count to 10. And these things can be really slow to start, but they snowball, and then do it over and over and over again. And then eventually, start adding it to bigger, more major meetings. But I really love, doing it at like at the end of PI planning or something is pretty cool. It is cool to honor people's great behaviors during a meeting, but when what you're really honoring is stuff that's happened over the last month, and then you're doing it over and over again, it makes a huge difference. So I'm a big fan of that. So yeah. So you can do these things yourself with your team or the people you influence for the meetings that you hold or whatever. But you can also really kind of take it further. And one of the things I've found is that to really instantiate some of these new behaviors, you will sometimes find you need to recharter your team. And whether that's a team of coaches, an RTE product manager, architecture leadership team, an Agile transformation officer, a LACE, or anything, I've recharted a CEO and their directs, right? And the reason the rechartering is so powerful is because one of the things that I do in that process is I help make visible the current spoken and unspoken ground rules that form the current culture. And then I get them to write explicit working agreements to guide behaviors and interactions specifically in support of the new culture. In addition to the other things you do with chartering to help explain the shape of the organization and the purpose of the team and all of that stuff. And by the way, if that sounds hard, yes, it helps to have an outside facilitator. You can call me anytime. No, even internally, getting someone else to help do that for your team if it's your team, is powerful. It's amazing to me when I think about it. I mean, we had monthly all hands meetings until we got bought. So, but we were up to 500 people in many different locations by then, and the way it worked was just a couple things that were key. One was the appreciations part of the meeting was like first. I mean, there was the opening, right? The agenda or whatever. Maybe if there was a big announcement or something, that would go first. But usually appreciations were the very first thing, which I didn't realize the brilliance of that until if you run out of time, that part happened, right? Which if it was at the end, it would get cut. And then there was never a structure around it. It was time boxed. So in a meeting that didn't have a lot of content, we might let it run a little longer. Meetings that were like chock full of new information, we might run it shorter, but it was never cut entirely. or very rarely, and if it was with explanation. And then because people kind of got used to it, I mean, so you can only do so many, so it was time boxed. But then, like, if someone in Australia wanted to do an appreciation and the timing of the all hands wasn't going to work, like, they would send a recording, a video or something. I mean, it was really great. And yeah, I like the idea of the financial benefit only because it's that, like, kind of money where your mouth is thing. But I'd rather hear 5 stories. God, I love the Christopher Avery talks about catching yourself. So he talks about wins. You have to celebrate wins. So when we'd get on our calls doing the leadership gift, when you get on the calls, you'd have to. But one of the things that counts as a win is something you were working on. It's not that you did it better. It's that you caught yourself doing the bad things sooner. Right. So like in his responsibility process, his theory is you move through the stages trying to get to responsibility. And so catching yourself in blame is a win. If you didn't fix it in the moment, that's okay. Like, if you just, I was like, so that's another one that we do at Elevate is we talk about wins, and we try to model the vulnerability that a win can be a pretty small incremental thing. I also recently read, or not too long ago, read Atomic Habits, which talks about if you want to kind of start changing some behaviors, like if you want to walk more, get outside more, right? You don't just set an intention that says I want to walk more. You try to create a habit that says, and you have a habit tracker, and maybe the goal is I want to take a walk 3 times a week, and make your goal easy. Like, and all my goals had to change when COVID started. Like, I had a goal around exercise, like workouts, that was whatever. Let's say it was 4 times a week or 5 times a week. My goal now is like way lower, and basically it's like make the goal accessible or possible again. And then when you've done it for a while and it doesn't even feel hard, then okay, now you could change the goal, right?
Yeah.
I love that. That kind of learn and grow, which again, it goes like it's iterative and incremental. Like, it is the Agile stuff. But when you're talking about culture, I realize, like, getting to these really core things, like I feel safe and encouraged to learn and grow, that's the thing that's going to increase your sense of belonging and your sense of community and your sense of, like, I could bring more of me here, which I'm crazy enough to want that for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.